So the second case is going to be where they give me a grouped frequency distribution, and they're asking us to calculate some of those things. All right, so not all of them. We're only going to calculate the mean and the mode. So we're not doing all of them here, just these two for this particular type of example. All right, so mean and mode are the only two that get calculated here. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute. Definitely jot your example down because you're going to want this in your notes so that you can kind of see how we're going to work on this. All right, so write that frequency distribution down for me. Okay, so I want you to think about first about how we make a frequency distribution. Okay, so back in chapter 2, how we set up one of these charts. All right. And what I want to ask you is if I look at one row of this, all right, so for example, if I look at that first row, all right, so what does it mean that I have a 2 under the frequency column? Where would that have come from if I was making the distribution myself? Why would there be a 2 there? So remember, we would have come from a list of numbers, right? We would have had this big list of numbers that we were working with. And we would have come up with our classes. And then where would we have gotten the 2 from? Yeah, so how did you find the frequencies? I guess is what I'm asking. You count them up, yeah. So I mean, you look at your set of numbers and you count, right? And so you would have counted 2 numbers between 5.5 and 20.5, right? Okay, so you don't have to write this down, but I'm gonna write it down, okay, just so we can see it. So there are 2 numbers in the data set between, and those are my boundaries, but I'm just going to keep it. So 5.5 and 20.5. Okay, does everybody agree with that? That from the original set of numbers, I would have counted 2 numbers in between 5.5 and 20.5. Okay. All right, so my next question is to you. And again, you don't have to write it down. I'm just writing it up here so we can see it. All right, so what are those 2 numbers? Okay, so I know that there were two numbers between 5.5 and 20.5. What were the two numbers? Do you know that? Looking at what we've got on the screen, can you tell me what those two numbers were? No. Okay, so I don't know. So this is a problem because when I go to calculate the mean, this thing on the top is supposed to be taking all the numbers and adding them up, right? And if I don't know what the numbers were, then I'm going to have a hard time adding them up. Does that make sense? Okay. So what we're going to have to do is estimate a little bit. That's going to be the best that we can do in this situation because I don't have the numbers. So I can't add them up. So I need to pick something between 5.5 and 20.5. And I'm going to say that the two numbers are that particular value. Okay, so I'm going to think about this a minute. So, I mean, if I pick something like 6 and said both of my numbers were 6, I would probably fall on the low end, right? I'd probably not put 6. And if I picked, say, 20 and said both of the numbers were 20, I'd probably come out too high, right? Because they're probably not both 20. So what might be a good number to pick between 5.5 and 20.5 for my two values? Anybody have a thought?
13.
All right, why are you saying 13?
Add 6 and 20 together in the bottom two.
Yeah, because that's kind of in the middle, right? So probably the best thing for me to do is to pick the number in the middle and let that be the two numbers. And that way, if one of them is a little high or one of them is a little low, it ought to balance itself out. Okay, so picking the number in the middle is picking, remember, what we call the midpoint. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do first. So in your paper, add a column for midpoint, and let's find those midpoint values. Okay, some of this I have to move. All right, so now, how do we find the midpoint? You guys remember how to do that? Okay, what do I need to do? I need to add the two numbers, the 5.5 and the 20.5, right? And then divide by 2. So that should give me 13, just like Cody said a minute ago, for that midpoint on that first class. All right, everybody okay with that? So 5.5 plus 20.5 divided by 2. We've already learned how to do that. That's going to give me my midpoint for that first class. All right, let's do the same thing for the other classes. Okay, so you guys take your calculators real quick, go through and calculate midpoints for me.
We divide every time.
Divide by 2 every time, yep. All right, anybody running into a problem there? Okay. So once that's done, then I want you to think about something for me. All right, so we said that our original problem was that we knew that there were two numbers between 5.5 and 20.5. We didn't know what they were. And now we're going to say that they're both 13. Okay, so I'm going to kind of make a list here for just a couple of minutes. So I know that I'm going to have two 13s, right, on this estimation that I'm going to do. All right, looking at my next one. All right, so I'm looking right here. So I know that there are three numbers between 20.5 and 35.5. What are those three numbers? 28s. Okay. All right, I know that there are 8 numbers between 35 and 50. What are those 8 numbers? They're all 43s. All right, there are 6 numbers in the next class. Those 6 numbers are what? 58s. Right, 3 numbers in the next class. Those 3 numbers are what? 73. And then finally, there are 3 88s. Okay, so that is what my data set now looks like. All right. So what I want us to think about now is the fact that the first part of the mean formula says that we're supposed to add up our numbers. So my first option is to come over here and actually add up all of these numbers that I listed out. But the problem with that is, first of all, it's going to take me a long time. And secondly, if my frequencies happen to be bigger, I really don't want to write them out every time. Like, I mean, if instead of 2 numbers in that first class, what if we had 200? I don't want to write out 200 13s just so that I can add them up later. Okay, so I did this because the numbers are small and I want you to see it. But in reality, I don't want to come over here and add everything up. So what I want to ask you is there an easier way?
Multiple.
Yeah, so instead, perfect. So instead of me doing, I'm just going to take the 43s, for example, because I can get to them easily. All right, it's 43 plus 43 plus 43 plus 43 all the way down. I could have said 43 times 8 because there are 8 of them. And then instead of me doing the 3 28s, 28 times 28 times 28, I could have done 28 times 3. Okay, so look at what that's going to mean. 28 times 3 is going to be right here. And 43 times 8 is going to be right here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more column to this thing where I actually do those multiplications. All right, so I'm going to add a column. I'm going to call it midpoint times the frequency. And I'm going to do that multiplication. So 28 times 3.
84.
84. All right, 43 times 8. 344. All right, and then I'm going to do it for all the other rows as well. Okay, so 13 times 2 is 26. 58 times 6 is 348. 73 times 3, 219. 88 times 3, 264. Okay, so let me stop there just for a second. Anybody have a question on why we're multiplying the midpoint times the frequency, or how we're getting those numbers? You guys okay here? Okay, anybody at home with something you need to ask? Okay, so remember that my goal here was to take all of these numbers over here and add them up. So now, how do I get it added up easier? Like I've added up these little parts of it, right? I've added up the 43 separately, and I know that that's 344, and I added up the 28 separately, and I know that that's 84. So what do I need to do next? I need to add up these little sums. So I need to add that to that. Okay, so I need to come over here and add up that column. All right, and when I add up that column, I'm going to get exactly what I would have gotten if I had added up all those numbers individually on the right-hand side. All right, so I'm going to check myself, and I'm getting 1285 right here. I have. Okay, so 6 is the most common answer, but 6 doesn't really make sense if I think about it. Okay, it's 6 is because there's 6 classes. But here's my down list, right? Like what are the 6 numbers? All right, so 1285 divided by 25 gives me, for my mean, 51.4. All right, anybody have a question? Okay, it goes with this class. So that is going to be my mode. So all I have to do is look for the highest frequency and write down the class that goes with that. So real work there on the road. That part should be pretty easy. So 35.5 to 50.5 because it has the highest frequency. All right. Anybody have a question there?
We would put 43.
Say that again. Yeah, you can put 43 actually. Yeah, you can put the midpoint if you want. So you could have written 43 as an, and that's an okay answer as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.